Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this video is a quick preview and prediction for a fight that goes down on the undercard of Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev 2 in Saudi Arabia. That fight is between Carlos Adames and Hamzah Sheeraz. Hamzah Sheeraz, of course, fighting for the WBC middleweight title, which is held by Carlos Adames. This is, on paper at least, the biggest step up in the career of Hamzah Sheeraz. Hamzah Sheeraz now, he's got to the point to where people are talking about him. He's starting to get that hype. He's starting to build that profile. And this is a bit of an acid test, I would say. Hamzah Sheeraz, of course, had a really productive 2024. Defeated Liam Williams in a round. He stopped fellow up-and-comer Austin Ammo Williams, in 11 rounds. In a fight where he had a bit of trouble but was always in control. And obviously, most recently in September, he knocked out Tyler Denny in 2 rounds on the undercard of Joshua versus Dubois. So yeah, whatever Sheeraz touched in 2024, he stopped, and stopped in pretty decent fashion. Carlos Adames, on the other hand, he's the champion, but he's coming into this fight with a lot less momentum. He only fought once in 2024, that was back in June, against perennial contender Terrell Gausha. In that fight, I don't think he looked particularly good. A little bit flat for my liking. Won the fight, but didn't look all that great. Had only one fight the year before, in 2023, against Julian J. Rock Williams. He stopped Julian Williams in that fight, won pretty convincingly, and only had one fight in 2022 against Juan Macias Montiel, where he won the interim WBC title. He knocked out Montiel in 3 rounds, and obviously Montiel gave Jamal Charlo a lot of trouble a year or so prior. So yeah, Adames has been inactive, as is the case with many PBC fighters. So it's kind of hard to say where he's at right now going into this fight. I haven't seen him active enough. But, I've watched a fair bit of Carlos Adames, and for my money, he's always been somewhat of an inconsistent fighter. One day he looks like a destroyer. The next he looks quite cumbersome and beatable. When he suffered his only loss to Patrick Teixeira a few years ago, I was very surprised he lost that fight. I was expecting him to beat Teixeira. But Teixeira that night got the job done, outboxed Adames, and even dropped him in that fight. But, following on from that, there's been performances that are hit and miss. Looked very good against Montiel, as we mentioned. Looked good against Julian Williams, but struggled against Terrell Gausha, and had a life and death with Sergey Derevyanchenko. So for me, Adames is one of those fighters. When he's on, he's kind of on. He's pretty dangerous. But when he's off, he is very beatable. I would describe Adames as a pressure guy. Does carry power, certainly the hardest puncher that Adames has faced as far as I'm concerned. Adames primarily boxes out of the orthodox stance. Likes to use his jab as he's coming forwards to set up his overhand right. And his right hand is pretty good because he can throw it straight, he can throw it curved and crooked, he can fire it over the top. And what I like about Adames, one thing I do like about Adames in this fight, is that he can fight somewhat out of a crouch. He can get under punches, which is going to be important against a tall, long guy who's 6'3", like Hamza Sheeraz. He can fight in back crouch and explode over the top with an overhand. And against a guy like Hamza Sheeraz, who is tall and fights tall, those sort of shots could be pretty important for him. And another thing that Adames does, which I would describe as a flaw, but it may actually work in this fight, possibly. I'd still lean towards it being a weakness, but Adames at times really does lunge in and reach in with his overhand right in particular. And he does it very quickly, and he can cover quite a lot of distance as he lunges in with that shot. Now, that's going to give Hamza ample opportunity to land that left hook, which he's got a very good left hook, as well as the lead uppercut. So Adames could be open for those shots when he leads in or lunges in with his overhand right. But one thing about Hamza Sheeraz, When he tries to reset, or when he tries to escape the pocket, when he tries to get some distance, sometimes he'll back up with his hands a bit too low, with his chin in the air. He's very upright, and sometimes, if Adames could time one of these lunging attacks right, he may be able to catch Sheeraz coming out as his defense isn't what it should be. Sheeraz has a good guard when you're loading up on him, when he's against the ropes, but when you're center ring, when he backs out and things of that nature, his defense is not as good. His defense is a lot more loose, but when Sheeraz is stationary, his guard is pretty good, but it's when he's actually kind of in center ring, when he's boxing with you, when he's trying to reset, etc. That's when Sheeraz's defensive frailties come through. And, we don't really know how good Sheeraz's chin is. We haven't seen Sheeraz fight a puncher like Carlos Adames. And quite frankly, we've seen Sheeraz get hurt. He got buzzed by Ammo Williams, if you watch that fight back. And early in his career, Sheeraz got dropped by some Argentinian dude. I forget the dude's name. I think it was Emmanuel Torres, maybe, or someone like that. Anyway, he got dropped early in his career against a nondescript South American with zero punching power. I think that Torres guy had like 6 or 7 knockouts in 20 odd fights. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Adames can test that chin. And quite frankly, when I look at Adames, when I look at his style, he's a risk taker. He likes to apply pressure, like I said. He likes to apply that front foot pressure, uses his jab to set up the overhand. He can change levels, go to the body, which again could be important against a tall, rangy guy like Sheeraz. And sometimes Sheeraz does back up to the ropes, where he lets you kind of tee off, as he did against Ammo Williams at times. And in those moments, maybe Adames can get some body work done. The only thing I will say, like I said, is Sheeraz's guard, when he's stationary like that, is pretty good. He can cover his whole body and his head and his chin pretty well with his arms, with his forearms and gloves. Another thing about Carlos Adames is he does switch it up a little bit. He can actually fight out of both stances. He's a lot more accomplished out of orthodox, but he can actually switch hit and fight out of a southpaw stance. And that's actually pretty effective at applying pressure if you can get the shifting technique down. And Carlos Adames does try to shift with his punches. He's not great at it, but he can do it to a degree. If you want a good example of a fighter who shifts, who uses the shifting technique, back in the day, of course, Roberto Duran really utilized that technique very effectively. But in more recent years, guys like Golovkin and Beterbiev also used that technique to close the distance on their opponents while punching. Now, Adames obviously doesn't do it anywhere near to the level as the guys I mentioned, but he can do it to a degree. For me, in this fight, Adames just needs to take risks. He needs to take risks, because I think if he stands off Hamzah Sheeraz, I just think he's going to be eating jabs and straights. He needs to try and bum rush Hamza Sheeraz in this fight. Come in low, fight out of a crouch, nice and compact, try to get under the straight punches of Sheeraz and quickly close that distance and work. Work. He has to be careful doing that, of course, with the uppercut and even the left hook. But for me, this is a fight that Adames purely needs to chase. He needs to take the risks. He can't engage in a boxing match or a tit-for-tat type of fight. I think that favours Sheeraz in a big way. Sheeraz is the type of opponent where you have to test him early on, because although he's looked pretty good in his career so far, for the most part, he's had it all his own way, and he's not really suffered any crises yet in his career. Yeah, he got dropped once early, but he dominated the rest of the fight. Yeah, Ammo Williams gave him a few problems here and there, but, Sheeraz never looked out of control. Adames needs to go in there and ask questions of Sheeraz, of his chin, of his durability, of his stamina, and of his heart. He needs to be the aggressor here. High output, body work, fighting out of a crouch, head movement. Again, these are things I've seen Adames do in his fights, but the issue with Adames from what I've seen is he's not consistent with it. Very inconsistent fighter. As for Sheeraz, man, I think the opportunities are going to be there. Sheeraz, to me, is what I would describe as obviously a tall, rangy boxer puncher with counter punch ability as well, with punching power. And he needs to ultimately keep this fight at range, box behind that jab, half step back, and look for those tells for when Carlos Adames is going to attack, and pick the holes in Adamez's defense, which is a little leaky when he's really going for it. Especially when he's throwing combinations, he does have a habit of like squaring up and really opening his body up, coming square on. And in those moments, of course, that's when you need the half step back, straight right hand, and time, Adames in the middle of his punches, in the middle of his combinations. But also when Adames is southpaw, his lead hand is exceptionally low, very low. The counter left hook is there for Hamzah Sheeraz against the southpaw. Again, especially considering Carlos Adames is a bit of a lunger. The left hook is there. We saw that left hook come up trumps against Ammo Williams, who's also a southpaw. That shot's going to be there for Hamzah Sheeraz. But for me, this fight is one of those fights where I look at both guys, I look at the flaws, particularly in Adames, and I see it as a fight that Sheeraz has the ability to win, and he should win. But I think this one's going to be about discipline for Sheeraz. This one's going to be about composure, because Adames is just that sort of guy who can drag you into fights, but he's going to give you the openings. He's going to give you the opportunities to counter. For me, it's whether Hamzah Sheeraz can remain disciplined in his biggest step up, in his biggest fight. It's whether he can remain disciplined, remain mature, remain composed, to take advantage of those moments. The main worry I have for Sheeraz in this fight is the lack of experience at world level. It is what happens if he starts bad. Let's say what happens if Adames comes in like a bull in a china shop and sets about Sheeraz, lands a couple of good shots, maybe shakes Sheeraz up. Can Sheeraz respond? Can he weather that? Or will his composure go out the window? I think he may have a couple of hard moments in this fight. I think it's got the potential for him to have a couple of hard moments. A couple of rocky moments. But I think if he contains his excitement, if he's mature in there and composed in there, managing the distance, keeping those hands up, I think he should win this fight. My prediction is going to be Hamzah Sheeraz by stoppage, by knockout. I'm not sure exactly when, but I'm going to go Sheeraz by knockout mid to late rounds. So like round 6 to 9, I would say, something like that. But I do give Carlos Adames a puncher's chance in this bout. But I look at both guys. Sheeraz taller, longer, younger, fresher, coming in with more momentum. I think stylistically he's got a lot there that can take advantage of the defensive flaws in Adames. And I think he's the most likely winner. But Adames has a shot here. Good fight. Should be a war. Should be a good one. Should be dramatic. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.